Nickel and Dimed, on Not Getting By in America, by Barbara Ehrenreich. Introduction. Imagine this. You're trying your best, working hard, following the rules. Yet, somehow, things aren't adding up. You're pouring everything you have into your job, maybe even 2 jobs, but the ground beneath your feet feels shaky. You can barely afford a safe place to sleep, let alone dream about the future. Sounds like a tough spot, right? Maybe even a nightmare from a bygone era. Well, what if I told you this wasn't some historical account, but the lived reality for millions of people, right now, in one of the richest countries on Earth? Today, we're diving deep into a book that pulled back the curtain on this reality, a book that became an instant classic, a New York Times bestseller, and required reading for anyone who wants to understand the true cost of convenience in modern America. We're talking about Nickel and Dimed, on Not Getting By in America by the brilliant Barbara Ehrenreich. Now, Barbara wasn't just any writer. She was whip-smart, armed with a PhD in biology, but also deeply connected to the struggles of working people. Her own family history was woven with tales of miners and factory workers. She knew, firsthand, that a life spent punching a clock wasn't just a job. It was a constant battle against, as her sister called it, the hopelessness of being a wage slave. The idea for this book sparked, ironically, over a fancy lunch. Barbara was chatting with her editor about poverty, about how anyone could possibly survive on the minimum wage jobs that millions were being pushed into, especially with welfare reform looming. She tossed out an idea. Someone ought to do the old-fashioned kind of journalism. Go out there and try it for themselves. She meant someone younger, hungrier. But her editor just smiled and said, "You." And just like that, Barbara Ehrenreich, an accomplished writer and intellectual, embarked on an extraordinary journey. She decided to step out of her comfortable life and enter the world of low-wage work, not as an observer, but as a participant. Her mission? To answer a simple, yet profound question: could she, a person with every advantage of education and background, actually survive on the wages paid to waitresses, maids, and retail clerks? Could she make ends meet, find a place to live, and keep herself fed on $6 or $7 an hour? What she discovered wasn't just about budgets and bottom lines. It was about dignity, exhaustion, the surprising kindness of strangers, the quiet indignities of the daily grind, and the shocking invisibility of the people who keep our society running. Stick with me through this summary, and I promise you, by the end, you won't just understand the struggles Barbara faced. You'll see the world around you, the restaurants you eat in, the hotels you stay in, the stores you shop at, with entirely new eyes. You'll grasp the hidden economics that shape so many lives and perhaps, just perhaps, question some of the assumptions we all hold about work, wealth, and what it truly means to get by in America. Book summary. Barbara Ehrenreich didn't just want to crunch numbers from afar. Her scientific background told her you had to get your hands dirty to find the truth. So, she set some ground rules for her experiment. Rule 1. No falling back on her fancy education or writing skills. Rule 2. Always take the highest paying job offered and give it her best shot. Rule 3. Find the cheapest possible housing that still offered basic safety and privacy. She gave herself a few safety nets. She'd always have a car her own or a rental, and she wouldn't allow herself to become homeless or go hungry. If things got desperate, she'd use her ATM card. She knew this wasn't about truly experiencing poverty. She had a safety net others didn't. Her goal was more straightforward. Could she match income to expenses, day in, day out? She also had advantages. Being white, a native English speaker, healthy, and without young children to care for. Her disguise was simple: a divorced homemaker re-entering the workforce, with 3 years of college. Her first stop was Key West, Florida, close to her actual home. The immediate challenge wasn't work, but housing. Even figuring on earning $7 an hour, affording rent seemed impossible. The options were flophouses or trailers, and even those were shockingly expensive. She quickly realized that in places desirable to tourists and the wealthy, the people cleaning the toilets and serving the food get squeezed out. She had to settle for a tiny efficiency cabin 30 miles away from job opportunities, costing $500 a month plus a hefty deposit, an amount she could only cover because she'd budgeted startup money, a luxury most people in this situation don't have. This was her first glimpse into the poverty trap. You need money to save money, whether it's for a rent deposit or a cooking pot to make cheap meals. Finding a job was the next hurdle. Despite ads seeming plentiful, getting callbacks was tough. Hotels? Supermarkets? Many involved lengthy applications, computerized interviews designed to test honesty and compliance, and mandatory drug tests. She eventually landed a job as a waitress at a grim hotel restaurant she called the Hearthside, earning a meager $2.43 an hour plus tips. The Fair Labor Standards Act says employers have to make up the difference if tips don't bring the wage up to the minimum, which was $5.15 then, but this fact was never mentioned. Training was a whirlwind, delivered by Gail, a wiry, fast-moving waitress juggling instructions with fragments of her own tragic life story. A boyfriend killed in prison, months spent living in her truck. Barbara quickly felt the sting of incompetence. Waitressing wasn't just carrying plates, it involved mastering ordering systems, juggling multiple tables, and endless side work, cleaning, prepping, restocking. Despite wanting scientific detachment, she found herself caring, driven by an old family precept to do things well. She also felt a surprising connection to her customers, many of them hard-working locals. This service ethic, she called it, made her want to give them the best experience possible, even if it meant bending rules, like putting extra croutons on a salad when the manager wasn't looking. She noticed her coworkers doing the same, sometimes dipping into their own tips to help a customer in need. It became clear that waitresses often express their humanity and earn tips by covertly distributing extra butter, sour cream, or whipped cream. For a short while, life seemed almost sustainable. She bonded with coworkers: Lionel, the Haitian busboy; Timmy, the teenage busboy; Joan, the feminist hostess; even Billy, the temperamental cook. She developed a routine: work till late, drive home listening to music, have a simple snack, sleep, wash her uniform, and repeat. But two major problems loomed. The first was management. Managers, she observed, existed solely to ensure the corporation, a distant entity, made money. Their job was to keep everyone busy, even during slow times, leading to pointless, theatrical tasks just to avoid looking idle. Mandatory meetings were less about strategy and more about reprimands, a dirty break room, rules against gossip, meaning talking among employees, threats of locker searches. A sudden drug crackdown, based on rumors, further eroded morale and trust, making Barbara feel like she was back in junior high. The second, more pressing problem was money. The job simply wasn't paying enough to live on. Her co-workers' housing situations were precarious. Gail shared a flophouse room for $250 a week before moving back into her truck. Claude, a cook, shared a 2-room apartment with 3 others. Annette, pregnant and abandoned, lived with her mother. Marianne and Tina paid exorbitant weekly rates for motel rooms or trailers. Joan, the hostess, lived in her van. Barbara realized her own $500 efficiency was only possible due to her initial savings. There were no secret economies of the poor. Instead, there were extra costs: paying weekly for rooms, eating expensive convenience food, going without health care until small problems became big, costly ones. Gail, for instance, couldn't afford her estrogen pills, leading to migraines requiring more expensive medication. Barbara's own finances were shaky, her tips were dwindling, and she calculated she'd be short on rent. She needed a second job. After fruitless searching for housekeeping roles, she landed another waitress position at Jerry's, a busy national chain restaurant attached to a budget hotel. Jerry's was chaos, a greasy, smelly, high-volume fat person's hell. There were no breaks, forcing staff to smoke cigarettes near the bathroom like votive candles, a small act of self-nurturance in a demanding environment. The pace was relentless, requiring a zen-like flow state just to keep up. She tried working both jobs for 2 days, grabbing fast food in the car between shifts, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. When her Hearthside manager caught her trying to sneak food during a lull, she quit, leaving Gail behind in her truck parked in the hotel lot. Jerry's demanded total energy burn. Pain became a constant companion, managed with ibuprofen. Management was personified by Joy, whose moods swung wildly, and BJ the bitch, who yelled constantly and enforced petty rules, like replacing whipped cream cans with baggies, suspecting employees of inhaling the propellant. BJ warned Barbara against chatting with customers. Her job was just to move food and money. Customers were obstacles, the enemy. Barbara found herself starting to see it that way, especially with difficult customers like the visible Christians who left minuscule tips. Still, there was camaraderie among the servers: Nita, Ellen, Lucy, who supported each other through sickness and concealed absences for bathroom breaks. Barbara's main human connection was George, a young Czech dishwasher, exploited by an agent who took a cut of his pay. She tried teaching him English. Then, George was accused of attempting to steal something minor from the dry storage room, likely out of hunger. Barbara felt paralyzed, unable to defend him, infected by a loathsome and servile feeling bred by the low-wage environment. Realizing Jerry's wasn't financially viable either, averaging only $7.50 per hour including tips, and wanting to cut her commute, she used her deposit and savings to move into a tiny, dilapidated trailer in the overseas trailer park closer to Key West. Life felt bleaker, surrounded by canned labor being preserved between shifts. Near the end of her month, she finally got a housekeeping job at the hotel attached to Jerry's, paying $6.10 an hour. Her trainer, Carly, was missing her front teeth, a stark symbol of the lack of healthcare. The work was grueling: stripping beds, scrubbing bathrooms, wrestling a monstrous vacuum cleaner, all fueled by daytime soaps playing on the room TVs. Carly moved slowly, worried about time motion studies and being paid by the room instead of the hour, brooding over the disrespect from guests and even other staff. Barbara attempted one last day juggling both jobs. Housekeeping left her drained. She showered, took Advil, and sponged food stains off her only work pants before heading to Jerry's. That night was the perfect storm: understaffed kitchen, manager Joy in a foul mood, and a table of 10 demanding British tourists overwhelming the already stressed system. Food was rejected. Joy screamed, hurled a tray, and confronted a complaining customer. Barbara just walked out. No notice, no collecting tips, just an overwhelming sense of failure. She hadn't just failed the experiment, she felt she'd failed her co-workers, especially George, whom she'd forgotten to give her tips. Before leaving Key West for good, she gave her trailer key and deposit to Gail. Next, Barbara headed to Portland, Maine. She chose it partly for its overwhelming whiteness, thinking it would be easier for her to blend into the low-wage workforce without questions, and partly because she'd heard about a severe labor shortage there. Arriving alone, she felt the anxiety of dislocation, common for the poor but alien to her middle-class life of planning and predictability. Again, housing was the first nightmare. The tight market meant rents were sky-high, even for dismal shares in basements with blocked windows or motel rooms converting to winter rentals. She settled for the Blue Haven Motel, a cottage costing $120 a week after an initial $200 tourist rate plus deposit, noting that her neighbors, mostly families, were crowded 3 or 4 to a room. Job hunting confirmed that despite the labor shortage, Portland was still a $6-7 an hour town. Employers seemed resistant to raising wages, a puzzle that defied standard economic theory. She applied everywhere: factories, Goodwill, Walmart, encountering another personality test obsessed with marijuana, and maid services. The application process itself was humbling, often impersonal, and the personality tests felt invasive, demanding a performance of unquestioning obedience. She accepted 2 jobs: dietary aide at Woodcrest Residential Facility, a nursing home $7 per hour weekends, and cleaner at the Maids, a corporate service $6.65 per hour weekdays. Woodcrest involved working the locked Alzheimer's ward, serving meals, dealing with confused and sometimes incontinent residents, and endless dishwashing. She found moments of connection, learning residents' names and quirks, but also faced indignities, like having milk thrown on her. She bonded slightly with Pete, a cook full of warnings about workplace gossip and backstabbing. One Saturday, she worked the entire ward alone due to staff shortages and broken equipment, pushing herself relentlessly, a stark example of the vulnerability of understaffed care facilities. The maids required a day and a half of training via videotape, learning a rigid, systematized method for cleaning, specific rags for specific surfaces, moving left to right, top to bottom, all timed with a stopwatch. The focus was less on actual sanitation, minimal water, no mention of germs, and more on cosmetic touches, fluffing pillows, facing labels outward, creating patterns in carpets, using a signature air freshener. The work itself was frantic. Teams ran to cars and houses, racing against the clock for each assigned home. Lunch breaks were often 5-minute convenience store stops, with many workers surviving on chips or nothing at all. Barbara noticed Rosalie, a young co-worker, getting dizzy from subsisting on Doritos. Co-workers shared stories of precarious living, extended families, housemates, financial stress. Small kindnesses existed, but desperation was evident. Sharing toll money, searching for free dental care. Physical pain was rampant, back problems, arthritis, shoulder injuries from past labor. The work involved constant exposure to intimate, unpleasant aspects of strangers' lives, shit-stained toilets, ubiquitous pubic hair. Owners were often distrustful, setting traps or spying, reinforcing the maid's feeling of invisibility and disrespect. Barbara developed an itchy, painful rash, likely from cleaning chemicals or unsanitary conditions, costing her $30 for treatment. She struggled with the indignity, the heat, the dehydration rules forbade drinking inside houses, and the sheer physical toll. Cleaning floors on hands and knees felt particularly degrading, a posture of submission. She tried adopting a detached, almost spiritual attitude, viewing the work as a form of service. This shattered when Holly, her pale, likely pregnant team leader, fell and injured her ankle. Holly refused to stop working, fearing Ted, the boss's, disapproval. Barbara confronted Ted on the phone about prioritizing money over health, but he dismissed her concerns. She attempted a one-person strike, refusing to work unless Holly got help, but her co-workers didn't join, and Holly herself insisted on continuing. Feeling helpless and enraged, Barbara finished the shift. Ted didn't fire her. Instead, he later gave her a small raise, perhaps trying to co-opt her. She realized the power of Ted's approval, stemming from the workers' chronic deprivation of respect elsewhere. On Pauline's last day, after 2 years of work and facing knee surgery from scrubbing, Ted offered no thanks or acknowledgement. Before leaving Maine, Barbara revealed her identity to her team. Lori expressed aspiration, "I'd like to have this stuff someday," while Colleen voiced a simpler desire, to be able to take a day off now and then, and still be able to buy groceries the next day. Her final stop was Minneapolis, Minnesota, chosen for its reportedly tight labor market and lower rents. She stayed temporarily with friends of friends, caring for their cockatiel, Budgie, a minor discomfort representing the compromises the poor often make for lodging. She quickly landed potential jobs at Walmart $7 per hour and Menards, a home improvement store $10 per hour initially quoted, later disputed, both contingent on passing drug tests. The anxiety over the tests due to recent marijuana use led her to a weekend detox regimen of water and diuretics. The apartment search in Minneapolis proved disastrous. The vacancy rate was under 1%, rents were skyrocketing, and affordable options were non-existent or required long waits. She felt the catch-22, needing stable housing for a job, but needing a job to afford housing. Her only hope seemed to be the Hopkins Park Plaza, offering weekly furnished rooms, but securing one proved elusive. She heard Caroline's story, a stark reminder of the real-life struggles behind her simulated ones. She endured the degrading drug testing process and attended a bizarre group interview for Mountain Air, selling Filter Queen vacuums disguised as environmental consulting. After passing both drug tests, she faced confusion over the Menards offer hours extended to 11 per day, pay questioned. Exhausted from a sleepless night after the lengthy Walmart orientation and unnerved by Menard's backtracking, she impulsively quit Menards before even starting, rationalizing that Walmart, as the nation's largest employer, offered more significant research potential. She noted how the hiring process, especially with drug tests, disempowers applicants, preventing negotiation. Forced out of her free lodging, she landed in the Clearview Inn, a dismal motel charging $245 a week, more than her take-home pay. Life there was insecure and uncomfortable. Screenless window, no fan. Transparent curtain, no bolt, smells of mold and mouse droppings. She felt the heightened fear poor women face in unsafe environments. Work at Walmart began anticlimactically. Assigned to ladies' wear softlines, her main job was zoning organizing by color, style, size, and endlessly returning clothes returns left in fitting rooms or scattered by customers. The work felt trivial compared to plumbing, oppressed by the enforced gentility. Yet, the sheer volume made it physically demanding, measured in shopping carts full of returns. She memorized the complex layout, only to have managers rearrange it frequently to surprise customers. Her shift changed to the 2 to 11 p.m. closing shift, increasing exhaustion and making breaks precious, calculated moments of relief. As shifts wore on, customer interactions shifted from aggressive hospitality to aggressive hostility as she resented the mess they created. She developed a strange sense of ownership over her department, wanting to keep it pristine, hating sales that disrupted her order. Conflicts arose, like with a tiny coworker focused solely on folding, revealing Barbara's own regression to a meaner, territorial Barb self. The housing situation remained impossible. Hopkins Park Plaza fell through again. Her Walmart wages couldn't cover even the cheapest weekly motel, let alone save for a deposit. A potential weekend supermarket job also evaporated. Seeking help from a charitable agency SEEP yielded only useless food items and the suggestion to move into a shelter. Crucially, she learned another Walmart employee had recently sought similar aid, confirming her co-workers were also struggling severely. She moved temporarily to a slightly better Comfort Inn $49.95/night, a luxury she couldn't sustain. There, she hit her stride at Walmart, achieving a flow state, putting clothes away almost automatically. She developed a theory that Walmart allows mothers to regress, acting like messy brats while associates clean up, providing a therapeutic outlet. Despite her improved performance, impatience grew. Why did people tolerate such low wages? Inertia, lack of better options, spousal support, multiple jobs, but also, perhaps, a workforce weeded of rebels by tests, dreaming of profit sharing, susceptible to the cult of Sam. The big box environment felt totalizing, erasing alternatives. She began subtly asking co-workers about wages and conditions, planting seeds of discontent, finding shared frustrations about overtime, schedules, and disrespectful managers. Hearing news of a local hotel workers' strike felt galvanizing. Caught stealing time to make housing calls, she narrowly avoided trouble with Howard. Realizing she couldn't afford to stay even another week, she told Melissa she was quitting. Melissa considered leaving too. On her final break, watching the strike news on TV, another co-worker shared her frustration, fist raised in solidarity. Barbara felt a pang of regret. Maybe, given more time, they could have done something. In her evaluation, Barbara gives herself a B+ as a worker, emphasizing that no job is truly unskilled and highlighting the physical and mental demands. However, she judges her ability to survive on the wages a failure, primarily due to exorbitant housing costs. She analyzes the systemic issues: the housing market skewed by wealth, government withdrawal from affordable housing support, and wages stagnating despite labor shortages due to employer resistance and workers' lack of mobility and information, the money taboo. She critiques the authoritarian workplace culture, surveillance, drug tests, personality tests, rules against talking, firing at will, arguing it functions as a dictatorship that erodes civil liberties and self-respect, keeping workers feeling unworthy and wages low. She contrasts this with the workers' actual pride and ingenuity, often hindered by management. The result is a culture of inequality where many earn far less than a living wage estimated at $14 per hour for a single parent with 2 kids. Poverty isn't sustainable, she concludes. It's an acute emergency marked by hunger, unstable housing, and untreated illness. Returning to her privileged life, she's struck by the invisibility of the poor to the affluent and argues the appropriate response isn't guilt, but shame at our societal dependence on the great sacrifice made by the underpaid working poor, who are the major philanthropists of our society. She ends with a quiet prediction that someday, the working poor will demand what they're worth. Commentary. Reading Barbara Ehrenreich's Nickel and Dimed isn't just reading a book. It's like putting on a pair of glasses that reveals a hidden layer of the world you thought you knew. It takes the everyday transactions, buying coffee, checking into a hotel, picking up clothes at a store, and exposes the human effort, the struggle, and often the quiet desperation that makes it all possible. What makes this book so powerful, nearly a quarter-century after its initial publication, is its raw honesty and Barbara's willingness to immerse herself, not just observe. She doesn't romanticize poverty, nor does she offer easy answers. She simply shows us what it feels like: the physical exhaustion, the gnawing anxiety about rent, the constant, low-level humiliations, the surprising moments of solidarity, the way your spirit can get worn down, nickel by nickel, dime by dime. In today's world, where we talk about essential workers but often fail to provide them with essential wages or protections, Ehrenreich's insights feel more relevant than ever. She forces us to confront the disconnect between the value of the work people do, caring for the sick, cleaning homes, serving food, stocking shelves, and the value society places on them, measured in dollars per hour. The book challenges the comfortable narrative that hard work alone guarantees a way out of poverty. Barbara worked incredibly hard, often juggling multiple demanding jobs, yet found herself constantly on the edge, struggling with the crushing costs of basic necessities, especially housing. It reveals poverty not as a personal failing, but often as a mathematical trap, where low wages and high costs create a cycle that's incredibly difficult to escape. So, what can we take away from this journey? How can we apply these lessons in our own lives? First, pay attention. Notice the people serving you, cleaning for you, stocking the shelves. See them not just as functions, but as individuals likely facing challenges you might not imagine. A simple acknowledgement, a moment of eye contact, a genuine thank you can mean more than you know. Second, tip generously when you can. For many service workers, tips aren't just extra. They're essential income needed to bridge the gap between their wage and the actual cost of living. Third, support efforts for fair wages. Whether it's advocating for a higher minimum wage, supporting businesses that pay a living wage, or understanding the importance of unions in giving workers a collective voice, recognize that fair compensation is fundamental to dignity. And finally, challenge assumptions. The next time you hear someone dismiss low-wage workers as unskilled or lacking ambition, remember Barbara's experience. Remember the physical toll, the mental stress, the constant calculations required just to survive. Remember the systemic barriers, the housing crisis, the power imbalance, the everyday indignities that make pulling yourself up by your bootstraps an impossible demand for so many. That was a deep dive into Nickel and Dimed on Not Getting By in America by Barbara Ehrenreich. We've journeyed through the demanding shifts, the impossible budgets, and the human stories that define the low-wage experience in America. But honestly, hearing me talk about it is like looking at a postcard of the Grand Canyon. It gives you an idea, but it doesn't capture the vastness, the detail, the way it makes you feel standing on the edge. The real power of this book lies in Barbara's voice, her sharp observations, and the unforgettable people she meets along the way. If her journey, her struggles, or the lives of the people she worked alongside resonated with you even a little bit, do yourself a favor, pick up the book. Reading it isn't just about learning facts, it's about gaining empathy, challenging your perspective, and truly understanding the human cost hidden beneath the surface of our everyday lives. You can find a link to the book in the description below. And hey, if this exploration added value to your day, Consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to Billionaire's Bookshelf. We unravel the insights from impactful books like this every episode, aiming to build our understanding of the world together. Click that subscribe button and let's continue learning and growing.